Damos inicio a nuestra segunda conferencia, Estándares de Sostenibilidad en Exploración E3+. Invitamos al escenario al señor Felix Lee, presidente de Prospectors and Developers Associations of Canada, PDAC. Él es geólogo económico con más de 30 años de experiencia, director y consultor principal de CSA Global Canadá, una consultora internacional de minería y geología. Antes de ocupar su cargo actual, el doctor Lee es propietario y presidente de la consultora de minería y geología con sede en Toronto, ACA Howe International Limited. Como director y vicepresidente de PDAC, el doctor Lee se ha desempeñado en los comités ejecutivo, de gobierno y nominación, desarrollo de recursos humanos y membresía. Gran parte de sus 12 años en PDAC se ha enfocado en enfrentar los desafíos de recursos humanos que enfrenta la industria y en ayudar al crecimiento del programa de carrera temprana y para estudiantes de PDAC. Les recordamos que para su comodidad disponemos del servicio de traducción simultánea. Invitamos al escenario al señor Felix Lee, a quien recibimos con un fuerte aplauso.
So good afternoon, everyone. I just want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their day to come and hear me present. I trust all of you have enjoyed a very good lunch, and I hope none of you partook in too many glasses of wine, lest I put you all to sleep with my presentation. Very quickly, my name is Felix Lee. I'm the president of the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada, otherwise known as the PDAC, or to many people, PDAC. I am a geologist by background and have worked in the exploration sector throughout my career. Now, back when I graduated in the 1980s, the concept of sustainability in mining and exploration wasn't even a thing. And most, if not all of us in the mining and mineral exploration sector paid very little attention to things such as social responsibility and environmental stewardship. Again, it just wasn't something we thought about. And so it is for much of our generation, my generation, and it is an ongoing learning experience when it comes to adapting sustainable principles in our work, in our exploration and mining projects around the world. And so there is an ongoing need for constant learning and sharing of ideas and principles, and hence the need for events such as this one. For many of the small exploration companies with limited resources, trying to understand just exactly how to go about introducing sustainable practices into your work, how to engage with communities, how to organize community development. These are things which for many of the smaller companies is a major challenge. Most companies just simply do not know where to begin. And so I am here today to provide or give you an overview of the PDAC's work in the area of sustainability, and in particular, go over with you some of the key principles behind one of our foundational programs, which is E3+, a framework for responsible exploration. And E3+ is was exactly developed to help small companies, as well as large, get started in adopting or implementing sustainable practices into their mining and exploration work. So before I begin, if I can get your attention, I'd just like to get a quick show of hands from those of you here in the room as to who in the room here has actually heard of the PDAC. So you raise your hands. All right, so a few of you. In any event, I'm glad I left this slide in the presentation. For those of you that are not already familiar with the PDAC is a Canadian national association and is the voice of Canada's mineral exploration industry. We have 8,000 members, both corporate and individual, and these members come from around the world. Those of you in the room who are already familiar with the PDAC will probably know us by our very large annual convention that's held in Toronto in March. What you may be less familiar with is what PDAC is about, or what PDAC does for the 361 days of the year that are not our convention. The PDAC exists primarily as an advocacy body, and as such we work very closely with government, in particular the Canadian federal government, advocating for a competitive and responsible Canadian exploration industry, both at home and abroad. And the PDAC has an extremely strong team of talented staff and volunteers who constantly monitor the risks and opportunities facing our industry, and they guide how PDAC helps our industry respond to those risks and opportunities. So very quickly, PDAC priorities. There are 6 priority areas that PDAC focuses its efforts on. These are access to capital. Simply put, without money, there is no exploration or mining. Then there's access to land. Again, without access to prospective mineralized areas, there is again no exploration and there is no mining. Indigenous affairs, responsible exploration guidelines, access to skills, and last but not least, the mineral industry abroad. So constantly monitoring global operations and the overall competitiveness of the Canadian industry. So PDAC's E3+ program falls within the responsible exploration priority and is a cornerstone of the PDAC sustainability program, which I'll cover with the next slide here. So PDAC's sustainability program is designed to support our members in their efforts to improve their performance with respect to responsible exploration. As many of you know, or those of you who are exploration geologists in the room here, many of you will know that explorationists, typically the geologists, are usually the first on the ground when approaching a new project. And just how that geologist conducts himself can quite often set the tone for the future of the property, particularly with regards to environmental stewardship, health and safety, and perhaps most importantly, the interaction with the local community. Whether companies are working their mineral claims in northern Canada, or in West Africa, Sierra Leone, or even here in Colombia, it's well understood by the vast majority of companies that they are guests in the communities and countries that they operate, and that they must conduct their business responsibly. So government, industry partners, and other stakeholders recognize the importance of this. And so as such, PDAC works very hard to support the industry with respect to its social performance, environmental performance, and health and safety performance, both at home and abroad. And so some of the initiatives that PDAC has worked on over the years, PDAC was the first industry to develop E3+, or basically what is a detailed guide for companies on how to explore responsibly. This is E3+. PDAC has also, from the very start, supported Canada's CSR strategy, which was launched in 2009 and most recently updated in 2014. PDAC has also quite proactively tried to demonstrate leadership in responsible exploration with a number of other initiatives. So PDAC was first to create something called First Engagement, a field guide for explorers. This is a document that essentially helps guide our members with starting out or beginning their community engagement efforts. PDAC has also developed a field safety pocket guide. This is a small little booklet for use by personnel in the field. And additionally, PDAC has also developed an exploration and mining guide for use by Aboriginal communities, which is designed to help Indigenous peoples understand the various stages of development, operations, and mining. So these are 3 documents that PDAC has developed and which are freely available actually on the PDAC website. If it's something that is of interest to you as a potential resource for your company or for your personnel, I would encourage you to visit the PDAC website and download a copy of those booklets. Together with our sister national association, the Mining Association of Canada, as well as 2 NGOs, PDAC also helped precipitate the Extractive Sector Transparency Measures Act, which is a legislative mechanism in Canada that requires companies to report their payments made to government. And then, again, for those of you who have had the opportunity to visit the PDAC convention in Toronto every year, you will know that we do have a very large Indigenous program as well as sustainability program, where we bring companies, communities, governments, and civil society together to discuss the key issues, challenges, and leading practices facing our industry. So on to E3+, which is why we're all here. So as I mentioned earlier, PDAC was the first industry to develop detailed information and guidance for companies on how to explore responsibly and help them reduce the risks to their projects. E3+ initially started in 2003, primarily as an environmental stewardship tool, and it was then called E3, which stood for Environmental Excellence in Exploration. And it was a big success. Very quickly, we had about 2,500 users operating in about 40 different countries using E3. And it became very clear to us quickly and early on that we needed to expand E3 to include social responsibility and health and safety, which we did. And we relaunched E3 as E3+ in 2009. Since then, E3+ has basically become an entire sustainability framework that helps exploration companies improve their performance in a transparent and accountable manner. So E3+ essentially helps companies assess social and environmental risks and then reduce and eliminate the negative impacts of those risks, and by so doing, earn a social license to operate. I should point out at this time that E3+ is fully a voluntary framework and was designed specifically for exploration companies and is adaptable and flexible to accommodate most of the different unique characteristics to exploration projects and the various jurisdictions that projects can be found in. The entire framework is, again, like the booklets, the entire framework is available online for free of charge. And all that a user is required to do is sign up. It's a simple matter of filling out a form on the PDAC website. And you can then access the entire framework and the available toolkits within free of charge going forward. So this is a visual representation of the components of E3, of the E3+ framework. At the top are the principles of E3+, essentially what should we be doing. The principles are accompanied by guidance notes, which essentially is about why should we be committing to these principles. And then the practical side of the 3+ framework are the toolkits, essentially describing how do we put these principles into practice. So the principles and guidance notes and the toolkits are actually intended for use by not just exploration companies and their contractors, but also communities, community groups, indigenous groups, government, and other stakeholders. Of the toolkits, there are 3: social responsibility, environmental stewardship, and health and safety. And these 3 toolkits are quite comprehensive. They tend to be fairly large documents. The health and safety document itself is about 400 pages long. The environmental stewardship, I believe, is about 150 pages long. But before we get into the toolkits, I will just briefly, quickly go over the principles with you and what they're all about. In all, the E3+ framework is based on 8 principles, and all are common to situations found in most mineral projects and mining projects. And they serve to inform companies about what is expected of them, both internally as well as externally. The guidance notes accompany and expand upon each principle, and they help practitioners with converting the principles into action. For example, they will define what CSR is for exploration and provide the rationale as to why CSR measures should be applied. So let's just quickly run through the 8 principles. Number 1, adopt responsible governance and management. This might include, for example, developing corporate ethics policy or sustainable development policy within the company, and working with contractors and employees to ensure there is a consistent understanding as well as messaging of the CSR objectives. Number 2, applying ethical business practices. This might include developing policies governing internal business practices, as well as, for example, suggesting that objectives be publicized as well, with the view that greater transparency will equate to greater incentive to perform, and so on. Respect for human rights. This might be as simple as developing an anti-discrimination and harassment policy within the company workplace, but also more broadly, the development of equitable employment opportunities for communities, as well as developing positive working relationships with community members. Commitment to project due diligence and risk assessment. This might, for example, include engaging with communities prior to applying for an exploration permit in order to understand, assess community concerns, needs, and requests, as well as identify any project risks and opportunities. Number 5, engage host communities and other affected and interested parties. This might, for example, include or involve engaging communities, again, prior to and also after applying for an exploration permit, by doing such things as organizing visits to projects by community members, by community elders, community council members, knowledge keepers, etc. Contribute to community development and social well-being is the 6th principle, and based on some of the presentations I've seen here this morning, there are certainly a number of companies that have embraced this principle already and are doing very well in this respect. Point 6 definitely can include providing employment opportunities for community members through community organizations, providing training certification, skills training such as drill helper training, or organizing educational visits to the project site for youth. Number 7, protecting the environment. Pretty self-explanatory, but can, of course, include things like monitoring your project's wildlife and vegetation impact, maintaining or ensuring your project has a light footprint when it comes to pushing in roads or developing infrastructure. Such issues as garbage pollution, water treatment, field camp, and drill site rehabilitation. And then lastly, safeguard the health and safety of workers and the local population. So this might include the monitoring and reporting of all safety incidents and ensuring that staff are aware of safety protocols, any updates to safety protocols, and communicating with the local population on health and safety concerns. So those are the 8 principles that essentially underpin the E3+ framework. They are, for the most part, I would say quite self-explanatory. But that being said, there is a considerable amount of guidance notes that accompany the principles to help you understand and hopefully translate the principles into practical, actionable things in your project. So again, back to the framework. I'm just going to touch upon the 3 toolkits below. These are really where the teeth of the toolkit comes into play. So the Excellence in Social Responsibility Toolkit, this is the Social Responsibility Toolkit. This toolkit promotes, among other things, advancement of environmental stewardship in the exploration stage of mineral development worldwide, and covers topics such as land disturbance, site management, water use and conservation, right through to reclamation and closure. The toolkits are quite comprehensive. This is just a very brief overview, but they do go into considerable detail with each of these topics here. If any are of interest to you, I would suggest or would encourage you to visit the PDAC website and take a look at this toolkit. This is the Environmental Stewardship Toolkit. Again, some of the areas that are covered by this toolkit. Sorry, I've got my notes here a little confused. Just let me step back here. Sorry, social responsibility, excuse me. So this toolkit promotes governance, project due diligence, community engagement, community development, ethical conduct, as well as boundaries of responsibility. Who's responsible for what? What am I responsible for? As well as human rights. As mentioned earlier as well, the PDAC also developed a guidance tool called First Engagement, a field guide for explorers. This is a booklet that is accessible to everyone. And PDAC also did develop an exploration and mining guide for Aboriginal communities. Both of these guides are freely available on the PDAC website. Okay, environmental stewardship. So this toolkit promotes advancement of our environmental stewardship in the exploration stage of mineral development and covers topics such as land disturbance, site management, water use and conservation, reclamation and closure. Again, pretty self-explanatory. And then the health and safety toolkit. This is probably the biggest of the toolkits. It's about 400 pages in size. And it covers a number of different circumstances and field situations that you might encounter in a mineral exploration or mining project. The toolkit will cover everything from working in an Arctic region to desert and tropical environments, and addresses such things as general safety principles, emergency response, wildlife, survival, weather, working with aircraft, working with boats, working with heavy machinery. And so this is the one toolkit which I think gets used quite a lot. You can pull out of the toolkit the various aspects which are most relevant to your project. And as I also mentioned, the PDAC offers a field safety pocket guide, which can be ordered in quantity or is freely available for download off the PDAC website. And the field pocket guide exists both in English, French, as well as Spanish. So as I mentioned earlier, the move towards adopting or increasing sustainable practices in mining and mineral exploration is an ongoing process, requiring continued learning and sharing of knowledge and experience. And so as such, the PDAC itself is committed to improving its sustainability guidance for its members. And the toolkits, the 3 toolkits that I've mentioned before, are considered living documents, and they are subject to continued modification and improvement and update. So as we speak, there's new content under development for E3+. We are in the process of developing diversity content. Improving diversity and inclusion in the mineral sector has become an increasingly important issue and was identified by the PDAC board as a strategic area that we need to focus some of our efforts. And so PDAC is working on new guidance related to diversity, specifically gender issues, and will include a focus on recruitment and retention in the industry, as well as minimizing the impacts of mining activities on women and girls in community. For the purpose of pulling together the diversity content, PDAC established a diversity and inclusion working group in 2017, 2018. And this is about a 30 strong group comprised of individuals from key stakeholder groups. So we have both mining and non-mining people involved in this working group. And for the past year and a half, they've been working on pulling together content or guidance with respect to gender diversity and improving on that. The working group serves as a leading knowledge hub for diversity and inclusion in the mineral exploration and mining industry, as well as contributes to the development of the guidance document to help improve performance and practice of the mineral exploration and mining industry related to diversity and inclusion. The document is currently in its final stages of review. We're very close to coming to a final document. We hope to be able to roll it out sometime in the summer of 2019. And that is content that will be added to the E3+ framework. Whether or not we have to rename E3+ to E4+, we'll see. I should note, though, that gender is just a very small part or one part of the overall diversity and inclusion conversation. And the plan is to continue to develop or expand on the guidance with respect to diversity and inclusion topics relevant to the industry. So also under development is an environmental stewardship toolkit update. So in 2017, PDAC sought to identify the top issues affecting the mineral exploration industry. And the results of this research, corroborated by many of our members, show that the ability of companies to engage and involve communities in their projects was a key concern for the industry going forward. So it's not just a simple matter of consulting communities, but rather engaging and involving communities in the mineral exploration projects. Additionally, environmental stewardship was noted as the key component to earning and maintaining public trust. And I don't think I have to remind everyone in this room about the catastrophic tailings dams failures that we've had recently, both in Brazil as well as Canada. So, environmental issues, environmental concerns within the broader community are very, very key. In 2018, PDAC conducted a gap analysis of its environmental stewardship toolkit, and for the purpose of highlighting areas for improvement or updating, as well as general document streamlining and management. And the PDAC is currently in the planning stages of 2 toolkit updates, the first focusing on user experience, accessibility, and efficiency of the toolkit as a whole, and the second on addressing content gaps within the toolkit. Last but not least, most recent addition to E3+ is a greenhouse gas emissions calculator, or GHG calculator. And this was released just in March of 2019 during the PDAC convention, and it's available for free online. The calculator provides exploration companies the opportunity to calculate their carbon footprint, basically gauge their project emissions and tailor those measurements to project-specific factors, such as the source of transportation or the fuel. In Canada, this is increasingly becoming important as the government is now levying a carbon tax on industry. And our industry, the mining as well as mineral exploration industry, is extremely vulnerable to a carbon tax, given that many of our projects are quite heavily dependent on the use of diesel fuel for its operations. So that is another addition to the overall E3+ toolkit that is again available online at the PDAC, off the PDAC website for free. So finally, I would just like to, again, thank you for the opportunity and privilege to speak to you all today about E3+. I've not really been able to go into the toolkits or the overall framework with great depth. There's just too much within the space of a 20-minute presentation. So I hope that you will take the opportunity to visit the PDAC website, specifically www.pdac.ca/E3+, to see the toolkits for yourself and see if there's anything there that could be of use or of interest to you. I hope this introduction will provide some food for thought and discussion. Perhaps this will dovetail nicely into the upcoming panel discussion on mechanisms and tools to enhance competitiveness. For those of you who wish to access E3+ for use or simply to know more, please check out the website. Additionally, the staff at PDAC will be happy to answer any questions or provide any further information on the framework and how to use it. You just need to reach out to PDAC, email them at info.pdac, and you'll have your answers. So thank you very much.